You're sick because you're weak, Sarah. My lawyer already drafted the eviction notice. You were never on the lease anyway. Get out. Take your disease and that bastard baby and go. Fred, please, I said get out. Take your mess and go. A sick pregnant wife is thrown out into the Chicago rain by her unfaithful boyfriend. Left to die in an alley, she loses one of her twin babies and slowly finds healing, justice, and a dangerous new kind of love when a Korean mafia boss helps her turn her pain into power. Hey, are you all right? You shouldn't be out here like this. I didn't know where else to go. It's okay. I've got you. Let's get you out of the rain. Welcome to the channel, beautiful souls. If stories of women rising from their darkest moments captivate you, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join our community, because Sarah's journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's continue. The night Fred Burrows threw Sarah Collins out of the house, the Chicago rain did not just fall. It attacked her like the world itself was angry with her. Her clothes were soaked through, her belly was heavy with twins, and her heart felt like it had been ripped from her chest and thrown into Lake Michigan. She thought that night was the end of her story. She did not know it was the night a stranger in an Armani suit would find her collapsed behind a Whole Foods and change her life forever. It wasn't always like this. Sarah remembered a time when love was the smell of her kimchi fusion tacos sizzling at the Logan Square Farmers Market. It was the sound of Fred's laughter as they shared samples from her food cart, their shoulders touching in the crowded weekend space. Back then he was just Fred, a charming guy with big dreams and a winning smile. He would hold her hand, his fingers warm against her palm, and tell her about the business empire he would one day build, the investments that would make them rich. We're going to make it, babe, he'd whisper against her neck, his voice full of a fire that made her believe in tomorrow. I'll get us out of this hustle. Lakeview, maybe even the Gold Coast. Whatever you want. Sarah didn't care about the Gold Coast. She only cared about the man whose arms were wrapped around her waist, whose dreams felt intertwined with her own. She believed in him when he suggested she start Comfort and Spice, believed in him when he offered to handle the business finances so she could focus on cooking, believed in him when he said every dollar she earned was going into investment opportunities that would set them up for life. She believed in him right up until the moment Vanessa Chen walked through their door wearing a Tiffany bracelet and Fred's t-shirt, and Sarah's entire world revealed itself to be a beautiful, terrible lie. Now 7 months pregnant with twins and battling preeclampsia that made every heartbeat feel like thunder in her skull, Sarah stumbled through Lakeview's rain-soaked streets. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her Kate Spade bag, a thrift store treasure, grew heavier with each step. Behind her, Fred and Vanessa were probably already celebrating her absence, perhaps in the bed Sarah had made that morning before the eviction. She passed the Starbucks where she used to dream about opening her own cafe. Past the boutiques where she'd window shopped for baby clothes she could never afford. Past couples huddled under shared umbrellas, living the life she thought she'd built. Her feet carried her without direction, running on pure survival instinct. When the dizziness became too much, when her legs finally gave out, she found herself in an alley behind a Whole Foods, collapsing into a pool of rainwater that mixed with something darker seeping from between her legs. This is how I die, she thought, her cheek pressed against wet concrete. Alone. Discarded. Like I never mattered at all. She didn't see the red Rolls-Royce that pulled up to the alley entrance. Didn't hear the sharp command in Korean that sent men running toward her. Didn't feel the expensive fabric of a suit jacket being draped over her shaking body. What she did feel, just before consciousness slipped away entirely, were strong arms lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and a voice, deep, accented, furious, saying something that sounded like a promise or a threat or perhaps both. Find out who did this to her. And bring me everything on this Fred Burrows. Sarah Collins didn't know it yet, but the man holding her was Jung Sang-min, and he never made idle threats. The woman Fred threw away like garbage had just been picked up by the most dangerous man in Chicago. And Jung Sang-min always protected what was his. Sarah woke to whiteness so pure it hurt her eyes. White silk sheets. White walls. White curtains billowing softly in front of floor-to-ceiling windows that framed downtown Chicago like a postcard she couldn't afford to buy. For a disorienting moment she thought she'd died and this was some kind of sterile heaven. Then the pain in her abdomen reminded her she was very much alive, and very much not in heaven. Ah, you're awake. A woman in her 50s entered, wearing expensive Prada glasses and carrying an iPad. Everything about her screamed competence. "I'm Dr. Kim. How are you feeling?" Sarah tried to sit up, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. "Pie babies. Still with you. For now." Dr. Kim's expression shifted from professional to genuinely concerned. "But Sarah, your preeclampsia is critical. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. We have days, maybe a week before we must deliver these babies or you'll stroke out. Do you understand?" Days. The word landed like a stone in her chest. She wasn't ready. He had no home, no money, no. The door opened and Sarah's breath caught. The man who entered moved like he owned not just this room but the entire city visible through those windows. Tall, impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than her entire catering business had made last year. With tattoos peeking above his collar that promised violence, his elegant exterior tried to hide. His face was beautiful in a dangerous way, sharp angles and darker eyes that seemed to see straight through her Target clearance nightgown to the broken woman beneath. "Leave us," he said quietly to Dr. Kim, who obeyed without question. Sarah should have been terrified. Every instinct screamed that this man was someone mothers warned their daughters about. Yet inexplicably she felt safer than she had in months. He pulled a chair close to her bed, movements fluid and controlled. When he spoke, his accent wrapped around the English words like silk around steel. "I'm Jung Sang-min. You collapsed outside my business. Who left you to die in the rain?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Fred," she whispered. "Fred Burrows." Something shifted behind Sang-min's eyes, a darkness rising that made Sarah's survival instincts finally kick in. But before she could process it, a younger man entered carrying her recovered Kate Spade bag, now cleaned and dried. "Boss, we found this on her." The assistant, Minjun, she heard Sang-min call him, placed the bag on the bed. "Everything's accounted for, but there's something." He pulled out a small USB drive. "This wasn't in the inventory," she gave the intake nurse. Sarah stared at it. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Minjun's fingers flew across his MacBook. The room went silent except for the clicking of keys. Then his face went pale. "Boss," he said slowly, looking up at Sang-min with something close to fear. "These are Volkov transaction records. Millions in wire transfers, shell companies, everything. She's been carrying evidence that could start a war." Sang-min's gaze locked onto Sarah, and she realized with crystallizing horror that she'd just gone from victim to something far more dangerous. A target. The fever dreams pulled Sarah under like a riptide, dragging her back 3 years to a sunny Saturday at the Logan Square Farmers Market. She could smell the gochugaru in her kimchi fusion tacos, hear the sizzle of pork belly on her portable griddle, feel the hope burning in her chest as customers lined up 6 deep at her little cart with its hand-painted comfort and spice sign. That's when Fred appeared, all charm and Ray-Ban aviators, ordering 3 tacos and asking about her unique fusion concept, like he actually cared. He ate standing at her cart, complimenting every bite, then stayed for an hour asking about her recipes, her dreams, her story. When she mentioned growing up in Illinois foster care, moving from home to home with nothing but a Betty Crocker cookbook her last foster mother had given her, something flickered in his eyes that she mistook for empathy. "You're special, Sarah," he'd said, and she, lonely, hungry for validation, had believed him. The fever dream fast-forwarded through their relationship like a tragic slideshow. Fred suggesting she quit her restaurant job to focus on catering full-time. Fred offering to manage the finances so she could focus on the creative stuff. Fred slowly, methodically cutting her off from friends who questioned his investment strategies. Her logging into her Chase bank account one day to find it empty, Fred explaining it was temporarily moved into higher yield opportunities. Every red flag she ignored because he made her feel seen. Chosen. In the dream, she watched herself sign documents without reading them, trust him with passwords, make herself smaller and smaller until she nearly disappeared. Sarah. Sarah, wake up. The voice pulled her back. Her eyes fluttered open to find Sang-min sitting in a sleek Eames chair beside her bed, his laptop balanced on his knee, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Dawn light painted Chicago's skyline pink and gold behind him. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, but he'd stayed. All night. "You talk in your sleep," he said quietly, closing his laptop. "You apologize. For everything. For existing. Sarah's throat tightened with shame, but Sang-min leaned forward, and she saw something in his face that shocked her, fury. Not at her. For her. A woman who built a business from a farmer's market cart while men with MBAs were still asking daddy for allowances should never apologize for breathing. His jaw clenched. This Fred Burrows, he didn't just steal your money. He stole your belief in your own worth. That's the real crime. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest, something that had been locked down for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Before she could name it, Dr. Kim burst through the door, her professional composure shattered. The babies are in distress, she said, already moving towards Sarah with urgent hands. Heart rates are dropping. We need to deliver now. Sang-min was on his feet instantly, his hand finding Sarah's. I'll be right there with you, he said, and somehow that promise from a dangerous stranger felt more solid than any Fred had ever made. Then they were moving, rushing toward an operating room, and Sarah realized with crystal clarity. Her old life was about to end completely. And something terrifying and new was about to begin. The operating room was hidden in the basement of what looked like any other Lincoln Park import warehouse, complete with shipping containers and a sign reading Han Global Trading LLC. But beneath the legitimate business was a fully equipped surgical suite that would make Northwestern Memorial jealous. Sarah barely registered the incongruity through the haze of anesthesia and terror. You're doing beautifully, Dr. Kim said, though Sarah felt like she was dying, split open and emptied out. Then she heard it. The first cry. Tiny, fragile, more kitten than human. Baby eighth girl. 2 pounds exactly, a nurse announced. Seconds later, another cry slightly stronger. Baby B girl. 2.5 pounds. Sarah tried to lift her head, desperate for a glimpse, but they were already moving. 2 impossibly small bundles whisked toward waiting incubators, their cries fading as they disappeared behind plastic walls. She wanted to scream, to demand they bring her babies back, but Sang-min's hand tightened around hers. They're alive, he said quietly. Focus on that. The days that followed blurred into an exhausted fog of beeping monitors and antiseptic smells. Sarah practically lived in the NICU watching her daughters, Ella and Grace, she'd named them in a moment of hope, fight for every breath through tubes and wires. Ella was smaller, struggling harder but so fierce. Grace was stronger but seemed lost without her sister pressed against her. Sang-min came every day. Always in the evening, after whatever dark business occupied his mornings. He'd arrive with containers from his mother's restaurant. Kimchi jjigae, galbi, banchan that reminded Sarah why she'd fallen in love with Korean flavors in the first place. They'd eat in silence, watching the babies, and somehow his presence made the terror bearable. On day 5, Sarah was dozing in the chair when Ella's monitor erupted in urgent alarms. We need the doctor. Now. A nurse's voice cut through the fog. Sarah was on her feet, hands pressed against the incubator, watching her tiny daughter's chest stutter and fail. Dr. Kim worked with desperate efficiency, but Sarah could see the truth in her eyes before she said the words. I'm sorry. There's nothing more we can do. They let Sarah hold Ella for the first and last time, this impossibly small person who'd fought so hard but couldn't fight forever. Sarah felt Sang-min's hand settle on her shoulder, solid and warm, the only thing keeping her from fragmenting into a million unrepairable pieces. I've got you, he whispered. I won't let you fall. 3 days later, they buried Ella in Sang-min's private rooftop garden overlooking the city, a space Sarah suspected few people ever saw. It was simple, just Sarah, Sang-min, Dr. Kim and Min-jun. Sarah placed a Williams-Sonoma baby blanket, the only thing she'd bought for her daughters, into the tiny casket. As the small service ended, Min-jun leaned close to Sang-min, whispering urgently. Sarah saw Sang-min's expression harden into something terrifying. What? She asked. Sang-min met her eyes and she saw murder there. Fred Burrows just filed a police report. He's claiming you embezzled $200,000 from him and disappeared. Sarah's grief transformed instantly into something colder, sharper. Fred wasn't just destroying her past. He was trying to eliminate her future. But he'd forgotten one crucial thing. She wasn't alone anymore. You need to know what you're in the middle of, Sang-min said, pouring Sarah a glass of Macallan from the bar in his penthouse office. Outside the windows, Chicago's South Side stretched like a kingdom, and Sarah was beginning to understand that's exactly what it was. His kingdom. He took the scotch, kneading the burn. Tell me everything. So he did. The protection rackets in Chinatown and Koreatown. The legitimate import business that funded the less legitimate gambling operations. The network of loyalty he'd built not through fear alone, but through a code. No drugs poisoning communities, no human trafficking, no innocent blood. I'm not a good man, Sarah, he said, his dark eyes holding hers. But I'm not a monster. The Volkovs are monsters, Minjun added, pulling up files on his iPad. Russian Mafia. North Side. They deal in everything Sang-min won't touch. Sarah's hands trembled as Sang-min opened the USB files on his MacBook Pro, spreading them across the screen like a prosecutor building a case. There it was, her comfort and spice invoices for a corporate event at $15,000. Another for a wedding at $22,000. Events she'd never catered, invoices she'd never written, but bearing her business license number and TIN. Fred used your legitimate business to clean Volkov money, Sang-min said quietly. Every invoice you actually submitted, he doctored 10 fake ones. You provided the perfect cover, a struggling small business with believable cash flow. Sarah felt her grief crystallizing into something harder, sharper. He didn't just leave me pregnant and sick. He framed me. Worse. Sang-min's jaw tightened. 3 years ago, the Volkovs wanted to expand into my territory. They targeted my sister Sun-hee, 23, studying at DePaul, in love with a boy I didn't trust. The boy worked for them. He fed them information, used her, and when she realized what he was, his voice cracked just slightly. They killed her. Dumped her body in Lake Michigan like garbage. Sarah's hand found his. Understanding finally why he'd saved her. She was his sister's ghost, another woman betrayed by a man she trusted. Fred made you complicit, Sang-min continued, his fingers interlacing with hers. And now both sides will want you silenced. The Volkovs because you have evidence. My enemies because you were found in my protection. And Fred. Boss. Minjun's face had gone white, staring at his laptop. Security footage from Northwestern Memorial. Fred just entered through the main entrance. He's got 2 Volkov enforcers with him. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Grace. She's still in the NICU. Sang-min was already moving, grabbing his phone, barking orders in rapid Korean. But Sarah saw something in his expression that terrified her more than anything else. Worry that they might be too late. Get every man we have to that hospital, Sang-min commanded, then turned to Sarah with lethal calm. If they touch your daughter, there won't be enough left of Fred Burrows to identify. Sarah believed him. And God help her, she hoped he meant it. They ran for the elevator, racing against a threat that might already be inside her daughter's room. If you're feeling Sarah's transformation in your bones, drop a comment below and let me know. Are you Team Sarah? Hit subscribe if you're invested in this journey, because things are about to get even more intense. Grace's incubator arrived at Sang-min's secured medical wing in the dead of night, accompanied by Dr. Kim and 3 armed guards. Sarah watched through bulletproof glass as her daughter, so tiny, so vulnerable, was settled into a fortress disguised as a luxury penthouse. She'd gotten there just minutes before Fred had. Minutes. The thought made her stomach turn. Teach me, Sarah said, finding Sang-min in his private gym the next morning. Her C-section incision still pulled when she moved, but she didn't care. Teach me to fight. To protect her. To protect myself. Sang-min looked at her like she was crazy, taking in her still healing body, the dark circles under her eyes, the grief that clung to her like a second skin. Sarah, you just lost a child. You're recovering from major surgery. You need rest, not. I need to stop being helpless. Her voice cracked but held. Fred's out there telling everyone I'm a thief. The Volkovs want me dead. And I can't even throw a proper punch. So teach me or I'll find someone who will. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Respect. Okay, he said quietly. But we do this right. The weeks that followed rewired Sarah's body and mind. Sang-min taught her to shoot at his private range, her hands steady on a Glock 19 as she learned to breathe through the recoil. Hannah, sharp, elegant, deadly, taught her to read microexpressions, to spot lies, to use men's underestimation as a weapon. You managed vendor contracts, supplier logistics, last-minute menu changes for Bridezillas, Hannah said over coffee one afternoon. That's pattern recognition under pressure. That's strategy. We're just applying it to a different game. And Sarah discovered Hannah was right. She could see 3 moves ahead, anticipate responses, find weaknesses in plans. Years of juggling catering chaos had trained her for this without knowing it. Late nights, she and Sang-min planned over takeout from his mother's restaurant, Chinese from Chinatown, sometimes just Starbucks coffee and exhaustion. The chemistry between them was undeniable. His hand lingering on hers when reviewing documents, her pulse racing when he stood too close during weapons training. But neither crossed that line. Not yet. Not while Grace still needed round-the-clock monitoring and Fred remained free. 6 weeks in, Sarah was grabbing an oat milk latte at a Wicker Park coffee shop when she spotted him. Tony Chin, one of Fred's associates, the one who used to hit on her at parties while Fred laughed. He approached with that same condescending smile. "Sarah Collins. Heard you've been hiding out. Fred's worried about you." Sarah's hand didn't shake as she sipped her latte. "Tell Fred if he comes near my daughter again, worried will be the least of his problems." Tony laughed, stepping closer to intimidate. "You think shacking up with some Korean gangster makes you dangerous? You're still just..." Sarah moved before he finished, using the technique Sang-min taught her. Redirecting his weight, sweeping his legs, putting him on the ground while barely spilling her coffee. She leaned down, voice deadly calm. "I'm the woman holding evidence that could put Fred and his Volkov friends in prison for life. Tell him Sarah Collins says hello." She walked out, adrenaline singing, and called Sang-min. "It worked. I handled it." His pride came through the phone. "I never doubted." That evening, Hannah entered Sang-min's office where Sarah was feeding Grace, her face grim. "We have a problem. Someone in our organization is feeding information to the Volkovs. They know about Grace's location, Sarah's training, everything." Sarah's blood ran cold. They had a traitor. And Grace was no longer safe. Paranoia was a living thing in Sang-min's organization, spreading like poison through the ranks. Sarah watched trusted men eye each other with suspicion, saw Hannah triple-check locks, noticed Minjun sleeping with a gun under his pillow. Everyone was a potential traitor. But Sarah had the advantage of being an outsider. While Sang-min's people looked for obvious signs, she looked for the small things her years managing comfort and spice had taught her to notice. The inconsistencies. Jean, Sang-min's oldest friend, suddenly wearing a Rolex he couldn't afford on his salary. Schedule changes he made without logging them. A nervous tell when certain names were mentioned. "It's Jean," she told Sang-min one night, hating the words even as she said them. The pain that crossed Sang-min's face was devastating. "Jean and I grew up together. He was at Sun-hee's funeral. He swore." "I know." Sarah showed him the evidence she'd compiled on her laptop. Bank records Minjun had pulled, casino receipts, timeline inconsistencies. The Volkovs own his gambling debts. 50,000 at the Rivers Casino. He didn't have a choice. But they both knew that was a lie. Jean had chosen himself over loyalty. The confrontation happened in Sang-min's office. Jean didn't deny it, just stood there with tears streaming down his face. "They were going to kill my mother," he whispered. "I'm sorry, brother. I'm so sorry." Sarah watched Sang-min's hand hover near his gun, watched him fight the darkness that wanted blood for blood. Finally he spoke in Korean, his voice like gravel. Minjun translated later. "You have until sunrise to disappear. If I ever see you again, not even your mother will recognize your body. Mercy, not murder." Sarah saw the man Sang-min chose to be, even when vengeance screamed louder. That evening, Sarah found Fred on Channel 7 News, doing an interview in front of her closed catering kitchen. "I trusted Sarah with everything," he said, looking genuinely wounded in his Brooks Brothers suit. "I just want to know she's safe and that we can work this out." Sarah stood at the penthouse windows. Grace finally strong enough to sleep in the nursery they'd built, monitors showing her tiny chest rising and falling. "I want them to hurt like I've hurt," she said quietly. Sang-min came to stand beside her, the city lights painting them both in shadow and gold. "Revenge is a poison," he said, then cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "But sometimes poison is the only cure." When his lips met hers, it wasn't gentle or tentative. It was a kiss born from shared grief, shared fury, shared understanding that they'd both been broken by betrayal and were choosing to rebuild together. Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, tasting vengeance and promise and something that felt dangerously like salvation. Her phone shattered the moment. Minjun's voice was urgent. Boss, the Volkovs just sent a message. They want Sarah and the USB drive delivered to them within 48 hours, or they're declaring war. They're coming for everything, your businesses, your territory, your people. Sang-min's eyes met Sarah's and she saw the impossible choice reflected there. Her life or everyone else's. But Sarah smiled, something fierce and new. Then let's give them a war they'll never forget. No. Sang-min's voice was flat, absolute. You're not putting yourself in the center of this. Sarah met his eyes across the war room table, surrounded by Minjun, Hannah, and maps of Chicago. I'm already in the center. Let me control it. She laid out her plan with the precision she'd once used for wedding timelines. Contact Fred, offer a trade, the USB drive for $500,000 and her freedom. Navy Pier as the location, public enough to discourage violence, controlled enough to manage. He thinks I'm weak. Let him keep thinking that until it's too late. And the Volkovs? Hannah asked. That's where Agent Morrison comes in. Sang-min pulled out his phone, his expression grim. Sarah had learned about Morrison, an FBI agent who tolerated Sang-min's gray area operations because Sang-min fed him information on truly dangerous players. A devil's bargain both men honored. Morrison arrived within the hour, skeptical until he saw the USB files. This is enough to take down half the Volkov operation, he said, scrolling through his iPad. But using a civilian as bait. I'm not asking for permission, Sarah interrupted. I'm offering you gift-wrapped criminals. Take it or leave it. Morrison studied her, then nodded slowly. We'll wire you, have tactical teams positioned. But Miss Collins, if this goes sideways. It won't. Sarah's voice held steel she hadn't possessed 3 months ago. Because I'm not the same woman Fred threw away. The next 48 hours were meticulous preparation. Sarah practiced her lines until they felt natural, rehearsed her body language with Hannah coaching every micro-expression. Sang-min's people surveilled Navy Pier, marking every exit, every sightline, every potential ambush point. They chose the Ferris wheel plaza. Open, visible, impossible to corner her without witnesses. The night before, Sarah stood at the penthouse windows, watching snow begin to fall over Chicago. Sang-min came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. You could still walk away, he whispered. I could handle this. Protect you. Sarah turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. I'm tired of being saved. Let me save myself. His kiss was desperate, urgent, a man trying to memorize a woman he might lose. They made love slowly, tenderly, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's scars. Sarah traced the tattoos on his chest, the physical armor he wore. He kissed the C-section scar she'd been ashamed of, making it beautiful. Come back to me, he whispered against her skin. Always, she promised. Dawn came too quickly. Sarah dressed in layers. Target jeans, a North Face jacket, deliberately looking like the struggling single mother Fred expected. The wire was taped between her breasts, invisible. Morrison's team was already positioning at the pier. Sarah checked on Grace one last time, kissed her daughter's perfect forehead. As she turned to leave, Grace's eyes opened and she began to cry, a wailing that felt like prophecy. Sang-min appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Sarah. It's just separation anxiety, Sarah said, though her hands trembled as she handed Grace to Dr. Kim. She'll be fine. I'll be fine. But as she rode the elevator down to the waiting car, Grace's cries echoing in her ears, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward something that would change everything. The question was whether she'd survive it. Navy Pier looked like a Christmas card come to life, strung with thousands of white lights that competed with the city skyline behind it. Tourists bundled in Columbia jackets carried Target shopping bags, queued at Garrett popcorn shops, seemingly oblivious to the deadly game about to unfold around them. Sarah stood near the Ferris wheel, her breath clouding in the December cold, the wire between her breasts feeling like ice. Through her earpiece she heard Morrison's voice. He's approaching. 2 Volkov enforcers flanking. Stay calm. Fred looked older, nervous, his Canada Goose coat unable to hide the tension in his shoulders. The Volkov men were obvious. Thick necks, dead eyes, hands in their pockets where guns waited. When Fred saw Sarah, relief and contempt warred on his face. Sarah. He tried to smile. I'm glad you came to your senses. She played her part perfectly, hunching her shoulders, making herself small the way she used to. I just want this over, Fred. The drive for the money and I disappear. You never see me again. Fred's smirk was everything she'd once mistaken for confidence. You were always so predictable, Sarah. So easy to manage. Something inside Sarah crystallized, sharp and unbreakable. She straightened, met his eyes and smiled. A new expression that had nothing to do with the woman he'd known. No, Fred. I was always underestimated. There's a difference. His face went pale. Sarah, what did you... Yow. Morrison's voice crackled. Everything happened at once. FBI tactical teams flooded from every direction, weapons drawn. Sang-min's people materialized from the crowd, cutting off escape routes. The Volkov enforcers reached for their guns, and suddenly civilians were screaming, running, chaos erupting like a bomb had detonated. Fred grabbed for Sarah, trying to use her as a shield, but she was ready. The training took over. She redirected his momentum, swept his legs, put him face down on the concrete with his arm twisted behind his back. It was almost beautiful. FBI. Don't move. Agents swarmed, cuffing Fred, cuffing the Volkov men who'd been too slow. Fred's face pressed against cold concrete, spittle flying as he snarled at Sarah. You think you've won? You're just his whore now instead of mine. You'll always be nothing without a man. Sarah crouched down close enough that only he could hear. No, Fred. I'm the woman who buried you. And I did it all by myself. As agents hauled Fred away, Sarah stood, finding Sang-min in the dispersing crowd. He moved toward her, checking her for injuries, and she fell into his arms, adrenaline finally crashing. It's done, she whispered. It's over. But Sang-min's expression was strange, his gaze fixed over her shoulder. Sarah turned to see a figure standing at the pier's edge. Older, distinguished, watching them with calculating eyes. He nodded once at Sang-min, a gesture of respect that felt significant, then disappeared into the night. Who was that? Sarah asked. Dmitry Volkov himself, Sang-min said quietly. The man who ordered my sister killed. Before Sarah could process that, Morrison approached, his face grim. We got Fred and 3 Volkov lieutenants, but... He hesitated. Volkov Sr. wasn't part of this. The men we arrested? They were skimming from him. Fred was their side operation. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They hadn't just taken down Fred. They'd done Volkov's dirty work for him. A black Mercedes SUV pulled up, windows sliding down. Inside sat Dmitry Volkov, gesturing politely. Mr. Jung. Miss Collins. I believe we have much to discuss. Will you join me for a drink? Sang-min's hand found Sarah's, squeezing once. In his eyes she saw the question. Run or face the devil who'd orchestrated everything? Sarah squeezed back. After everything she'd survived, she wasn't running anymore. They walked toward the SUV together, toward a conversation that would change the game completely. Spring came to Chicago like a promise kept. Sarah stood in the center of her new restaurant, Phoenix and Grace, watching servers make final adjustments to white-cloth tables, the scent of her kimchi braised short ribs mixing with fresh baked bread. The name on the door honored both daughters. One who'd flown too soon, one who'd survived to soar. Grace, 8 months old now, slept peacefully in a designer carrier near the host stand, her healthy pink cheeks a miracle Sarah never took for granted. Hannah stood guard nearby, scrolling through her iPhone, managing 3 of Sang-min's legitimate businesses simultaneously. The Chicago Tribune food critic had already arrived, admiring the exposed brick walls, the blend of industrial chic and Korean traditional elements. Sarah had designed every detail herself, funded by Sang-min's legitimate import business but built with her vision, her sweat, her refusal to stay broken. You did it, Sang-min said, appearing beside her in an impeccable charcoal suit. 3 months since Navy Pier and he still looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous in equal measure. We did it, Sarah corrected. The meeting with Dmitry Volkov had been surreal. Sitting in his Mercedes drinking Russian vodka, learning that Fred and his Volkov handlers had been skimming millions. You did me a favor, Volkov had said, his English perfect and terrifying. Consider your debt paid. And Miss Collins, you have my respect. It wasn't friendship, would never be friendship. But it was neutrality which in their world was worth more than gold. Fred was serving 15 years at Stateville Correctional, his testimony having bought him a reduced sentence. Sometimes Sarah thought about visiting, just to let him see who she'd become. But she never did. He didn't deserve even that much of her time. Her relationship with Sang-min had evolved into something neither had expected. A true partnership. She managed his legitimate businesses, bringing strategic thinking and a clean reputation that opened doors his past couldn't. He remained in the shadows when needed, but was changing, softening, daring to hope for a future beyond survival. Tonight, after the restaurant closed, they'd finalize wedding plans. A ceremony blending Korean and American traditions, scheduled for Grace's first birthday. A beginning built on endings. Sarah slipped away to the kitchen, pulled out her Moleskine journal, and read the letter she'd written to Ella months ago. You were here for only 5 days, but you gave me a reason to become the mother, the woman I needed to be. I'll carry you forever. When she looked up, Sang-min was watching her from across the restaurant, and their eyes met with understanding that transcended words. She wasn't the woman Fred had thrown away like garbage. She wasn't the broken victim who'd collapsed in a rain-soaked alley behind a Whole Foods. She was Sarah Collins, survivor, mother, chef, partner to a dangerous man, more powerful than she'd ever imagined. That evening, as the restaurant's success became clear and Grace slept peacefully, Sarah and Sang-min stood on their penthouse balcony watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, Grace secure between them. You know what the best revenge is? Sarah asked quietly. Tell me. Living so well that the past becomes unrecognizable. She turned in his arms, kissed him softly. Thank you for finding me that night. No, Yobo, Sang-min whispered, using the Korean endearment that meant, my love. Thank you for letting yourself be found. Below them, Chicago glittered like a promise. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky. And between them, Grace stirred and settled, content in the knowledge that she was loved, protected, whole. They were a family forged in fire, trauma, and impossible choices. And they were unbreakable. Sarah found her strength in the darkest moment, and maybe her story reminded you of your own power. If this resonated with you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't go anywhere. My next video drops soon with another powerful story of a woman who refused to stay broken. Subscribe so you never miss it. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you know.